guys, and welcome to another discussion video. And back in May 2020, I woke up and I saw a notification for a new Paper Mario game releasing. And that came absolutely out of nowhere, a new game releasing, and that kind of spiraled my obsession into the Paper Mario series, but that's a discussion for another day. Main topic today is Nintendo and randomness. Well, sure, they aren't as really random as they were in 2020. Throughout the Switch era, they have been pretty random. Like, even before the pandemic and then kind of after everything, they've really been random about, like, their announcements and everything. And I feel like that probably has to do with their philosophy of advertising and a lot of things, because I've noticed, like, this year so far, like, a lot of the Nintendo Switch Online announcements have came out of nowhere, like F-Zero, the NES and SNES, and Sega Genesis announcements. The only reason I've heard about these, like, ahead of time is because of the maintenance notifications, like, because there's, like, a Twitter account called NinStatusBot that I look at for maintenance for certain games. Sometimes it can help indicate when an update's going to happen or not. So it's just really random with their additions and updates of certain games. And also Nintendo Switch updates themselves can be pretty random too, as they can just add features like folders were just added out of nowhere, or groups as Nintendo calls them. Like, a lot of features are just added out of nowhere, and it's really interesting how Nintendo does things. They really don't have a set schedule other than their main AAA games that they have, which is really interesting, and it really makes it interesting to be a Nintendo fan, even though they have some not so good practices, like some really scummy business practices. Like, I gotta admit, it's really interesting to see what Nintendo's gonna do next. Like, each week, they have something. Like, they have something to show. Like, if it's a new random game announcement, a new update, new hardware, like, it's just, you never know what to expect from Nintendo, which is really interesting. And just throughout the past couple of years, it's just been really, I would say it's really fun to kind of keep up with Nintendo and what they're gonna do. And it's just interesting because this has been more apparent ever since 2017 in the Switch era. They've been doing things like this, and I feel like it's been gradually increasing. Like, in 2020, that was basically all random announcements, but now I do think the random announcements are still pretty frequent, and there's still, like, a lot of really random announcements and game announcements and different things that happen. And I feel like Nintendo does this for a few different reasons. Like, I mean, one reason is that what I already mentioned is because it's really engaging and it really keeps their fans engaged. Like, it's always nice to have a set schedule. In a lot of cases, I prefer a set schedule, and I honestly would really like a set schedule for the Nintendo Switch Online games. But looking at Nintendo in general, like, not including specific types of announcements, but just the whole company in general, it's really interesting to see, like, different announcements come in, like, different weeks, like, whether it's, like, an update to a certain game, or just, like, a Nintendo Switch update, or just something random. It's just really interesting to see. Twitter usually has a pretty big reaction to it, and, like, overall, I feel like it benefits Nintendo a lot, and I know it's probably not contributing to the overall sales of the Switch. It's definitely helping it's definitely helping keep more people engaged. And I feel like Nintendo could execute this a little better, too. Like, I feel like they might indicate, I mean, I feel like it might take away from the randomness, but it would be nice if Nintendo indicated when, like, certain announcements will happen. Like, let's say, Nintendo could say, like, oh, updates for certain things will be on Tuesdays, which they usually are. They're usually either on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And I think that would be nice to see, like, what we could get ahead of time, but I do think it's really interesting to see, like, random announcements. Another example that I didn't mention earlier for random announcements is My Nintendo. And My Nintendo is a really interesting thing they've been doing. For the first few years, it really wasn't that interesting. They had discounts and 3DS themes and wallpapers, stuff like that. Not really interesting. But in 2020, they started doing physical products, and I've actually been doing unboxing videos. And sure, they aren't on the same level of quality as Club Nintendo. They still are pretty good. Like, there are these really good Metroid Dread posters and Super Mario 3D All-Stars posters, and I feel like every once in a while they put out a really good reward, and that's another thing that's random. And what's interesting about those is that, like, half the time they don't even post it on Twitter. Sure, there still are a lot of posts about the My Nintendo physical rewards, but there's been a lot of them that haven't gotten a Twitter announcement at all, which is really interesting. And Nintendo seems to do certain features and roll out some features kind of like in hidden ways, which is really interesting too. It's another kind of aspect of the randomness. And one of these features, other than My Nintendo, is the new icon system that they just launched back in March. I think it was around the beginning of March, where they had these customizable icons you could have with My Nintendo and Nintendo Switch Online. And sure, it was during the time where Nintendo wasn't really tweeting much, but it still is another random thing, and it was just really unexpected because Nintendo, I don't think they made any announcement anywhere, like even like with Twitter or any like sort of news thing, and it just popped out of nowhere, and that was really interesting. Like, some of their features just kind of do that sometimes. Like, I mean, Nintendo mostly does say stuff on Twitter, but like, sometimes it could even be more mysterious, and they don't even say anything, which is really interesting. And that was one of the cases. Sure, they did announce it for like April and everything, and I'm sure they'll continue to announce like the new icons and new customizations and everything, but it's always interesting to see something that's kind of mysterious. Like, Nintendo doesn't even reveal it. Like, a lot of the time I find this stuff out from other Twitter accounts kind of revealing stuff about Nintendo and everything, which is really interesting. So I feel like Nintendo's randomness overall has been pretty engaging, and it's partially why the Switch era is so interesting. Like, I mean, it kind of distracts from a lot of the kind of the bad things that Nintendo does, and I mean, that's partially a bad thing, because, like, I mean, we really need to kind of be aware of some of the scummy moves that Nintendo makes. But I would also argue that it's somewhat of a good thing, too, because it makes it really fun to be a Nintendo fan, and it really makes these announcements really interesting, and it kind of keeps you wondering each week if Nintendo's gonna do something new, and it's just really engaging and really fun overall. So, anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and make sure to check out my Discord server and Twitter if you want to. Goodbye.